Welcome to Alexandrians with Dani Karim, where I interview authors, both living and dead ones, through the power of AI. In today's conversation, I speak with Neil Wood, former Air Force veteran with top secret clearance, professional athlete, best-selling author, and one of the world's foremost experts in sales and negotiation, having generated over 1 billion throughout his entire career. We explore his journey from poverty to becoming wealthy, the life-changing lessons he learned from his mentor, Colonel Tom Kirk, the counterintuitive art of authentic selling, and how humanity's identity crisis might be healed by creating a new, unifying vision for the world. Please enjoy this episode, and if it resonates with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with other Alexandrians. Neil, so happy to welcome you to the show.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for having me on your show. I've reviewed some of the other conversations you've had with folks, and you're just so genuine and so sincere and authentic. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. I will record this episode and make a short out of it and send it to all people who will say bad things about me in the future as counterproof testimonials, so to say. Names in my culture mean a lot. And I wanted to ask you, what's the meaning and the story behind your name?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't believe I've been asked that question in 40 years. My father, originally, his family's from England. Or Scotland, somewhere over there. And Neil meant leader, is what my father told me. And he always raised me to be a leader. And whether it's as captain of baseball or football teams or class president, he always encouraged me, take the lead, make things happen, get people involved, encourage them, lead them, set the pace. So I had nothing to do with the name, but I believe I've lived up to it.
Isn't it strange that people don't ask these questions anymore?
That's so interesting. Thank you for asking that. It flashed me back to the conversation I had with my father many, many years ago. Like, how do you choose that name? Because there are not many Neils. This is Neil Young, Fred Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. There's a Neil Sedaka. Haven't met many Neils.
Well, there's also Neil Armstrong, which is like, I
Neil
feel like
Armstrong?
there could be a very high quality club of people with just Neils only, I would feel.
Yes.
Tell me about one of your earliest memories. How did you grow up, and where do you feel your story began?
I had such a fascinating youth. My mother and father met at a diner, and they just happened to connect over a cup of coffee. And before too long, like 10 months later, I arrived, and yet my father was a Navy SEAL, so I got to see him twice a year. My mother wasn't ready to be a mother, so I ended up in foster homes. Those are families that take care of other kids who are not wanted. I landed in foster homes for most of the first 6 years of my life. And that's not a pity party. Here's the good news. The foster families that took me in and adopted me for 6 months or 9 months were really wonderful. They were kind, they were religious, they cared about people. And I thought, how lucky was I? Because I've heard many horror stories. So I happened to meet really nice people in the beginning of my life. And then when I was 7, my father came home from overseas and he was going to be home a little bit more full time. And so we got our family together. At that point, there were 5 kids. And, I lucked out because my father, being the oldest child, my father took an especially strong liking to me. So we would go hunting and fishing and hiking and baseball games and football games. And I learned so much from him, Daniel. And here's what I mean by that. The things he had to do as a Navy SEAL and being in the Navy, he was brave. He was a leader. He was courageous. And he took a lot of risks. And I learned from that. I learned from watching him. And, he taught me gosh, I must have been 8 years old. And he said, I'm going to bring you to the town to get you involved in Little League baseball. That was big in our town back then. We didn't have football like you guys have in Europe, but it was baseball. And he said, I want you to learn how to become a pitcher because I was left-handed. And he got me started. So to me, he was a great role model. And from there, it just took off through school and beyond. So he was my first role model and mentor. And I think you can relate to that with your dad.
Yeah, very much so. And it's my father was also absent for different reasons, but he was in a secret unit of his army, pretty much, and received was trained somewhat to be of a spy, but his training was mostly psychological, which was very interesting in a way. And he grew up in a country that was very unstable. Wars every 10 years, civil wars, wars with the governing nations in Lebanon in a way. So my father
Yeah.
really early on made an effort to teach me through our correspondences, even if we are far away, to survive in the only world that he knew, which is a
Hmm.
world that was very dangerous with very few friends in it in a way. And that had an interesting effect on me. One of the questions that I would like to ask you also is you were speaking of foster homes also. A famous person who also did that was Steve Jobs.
Exactly right.
Yeah, and one of the
Exactly
things
right.
that I feel is interesting is like that I like to ask for people is um, retrospectively a nexus moment where you feel a particular circumstance in the earliest of your chapters helped you to develop a little something that wasn't available to somebody who had the traditional entry to life, so to say.
I consider myself very grateful because my early years could have gone in many directions. I happened to luck out with really, as I mentioned, really kind, loving people. So that made a difference in the trajectory of my life. And then a few years later, when I was about 12 years old, somebody at school, maybe a guidance counselor, I don't know, somebody encouraged me to start reading books by Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking. You can if you think you can. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I was the only 12 and 13-year-old person at my school reading those books because you would see who took the books out before. I was the only one. And when I read about some of the things that other people had gone through in history and how they turned their life around, I realized that I couldn't really have a pity party because, and we'll talk later about one of the mentors. I learned early in life that we are responsible for our life, for our attitude, for our goals, no matter what we come from. We are responsible for our attitude. It's one of the things that I talk about as controllables. We can't control the government. We can't control politicians, how people are going to treat us. We do control our thoughts and what we say to others, how we treat others, and how we look at the world. That is our choice, 100%. Maybe not when you're 5 years old, but as you get up into your teens and beyond that, it's certainly in your 20s. Those are controllables that we have to take responsibility for. So with those books, Daniel, I read about people who overcame tremendous adversity, and it gave me encouragement and it gave me energy to tell myself, hey, if they can go through that, if they can survive that, you can do this. So decide what you want and be a good guy and encourage other people. And that was really how I lived the next, well, 55 years. So I haven't really changed since I was in junior high or high school as far as my attitude goes and how I treat other people. And um, that was the foundation for me.
Yeah, one of the things I'm interested in also is how things that at the moment feel like catastrophes or something that does not work out for us later on feels like that's exactly what the doctor ordered. I had a teacher, he was very strange. His name was Mr. Eggers. Shout out to him if you listen to it. 2 meter tall, bald guy, very angry, phenomenal teacher. And he was the only person who didn't tolerate my bullshit, I feel. And he was very punitive. And one of his tasks was that, well, everybody in the summer was allowed to go home. I had to reorganize the entire library. And I had an interesting experience where when I was in this little library, like you, I noticed like who picked out these books. And I
Right.
noticed that nobody would ever go to that. I would read names of books like Dante Alighieri, The Divine Comedy, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, The Gulag Archipelago, Franco, and all these kind of books. And I used to steal those books personally. And he always pretended that he didn't notice, but I know exactly that he was kind of happy that he was fueling my criminal drive at that such an early age in a good direction. And I would like what my entire backpack was filled with them, and it was a great little tango. We danced for a while he pretended to not see, and I was very happy to move. Any teacher that comes to mind from school that or outside of school that you feel inspired a lot for learning in a way? Because one of my favorite quotes is from Socrates, who said, "The purpose of education is not to fill a vessel, but to kindle a fire." If I recall that quote correctly. Anybody who was
Hmm.
the linchpin, so to say.
Some of it came from those books, like from Napoleon Hill and Norman Vincent Peale, to learn all you can, to be the best you can be, and uh, somebody along the way. Maybe it was Tony Robbins, but I didn't listen to him until I was in my late 20s. Readers are leaders. Readers are leaders, and I thought that was interesting. I have a vast library behind me, something like you have behind you, and I've had it for years and years and years. And at one point, I had so many books, I simply had to give some away to the local library. I love reading. I love learning new things, and especially in the life we're living now, learning about AI and the power of that, and not to replace my thoughts, to add to my thoughts, to make me more articulate, to reinforce my message to other people. I don't know. I wonder, and Daniel, you've interviewed a lot of really sharp people. Uh, Curious people tend to really do well in life
Yeah, it's
because we want to learn, right? We're open to learning and exploring new ideas and giving it a shot. Possible? What do you think?
I was once in South Africa, and I met some of the people who went in were jailmates to Nelson Mandela, and I was very at that time I tried to write my first book and failed miserably. Shout out to Jolene if you're listening to this. She's a girl I met over there, um and one of the things that I was and he the guards of the prison he wrote the book in, they always took his manuscripts and burned them, and he had to start over and again. And I was anticipating that he became this very dark person, because I'm driven by, I'm a very competitive guy. I have a rather dark temperament. But then when I talked to the guys who were with him in prison, they described him as the most curious guy they ever met, and the guy who made the dirtiest jokes of all the people they have ever run. I was like, not what I expected, but it seems to be that there's like the quirky, curious people are the ones who master the craft at the most. What is an example where curiosity manifested itself for you? And also one of the questions maybe before that, your father was a Navy SEAL. You're a very light-hearted person. Even maybe this is my public persona. How come you preserve the purity of your creative pursuits instead of going into the other direction a little bit?
It's our choice. I've met a lot of people in my years like you have, and I have found some to be very negative and bitter, and what we would say in the States is having a chip on their shoulder. I'll give you an example. When I was 16, I ran away from home because things weren't so good. It was kind of a violent, negative environment. And through my readings, I learned that if you don't like the way things are, either change them or change your environment. If you don't like the way things are, change what's happening or change your environment. So one night at 10 o'clock at night, I jumped out my bedroom window. Don't worry, we lived on the first floor, so it was okay. And I ran away from home and never went home again. And about 5 months later, I was living in the woods and showering at the gym because I was an athlete, so I had access to the gym. And about 6 months later, a local family who had sons I went to school with, legally adopted me and brought me into their family. And I went from a home that was really, bitter, and mom was really angry and her, all that stuff. And I joined a family that was so loving and kind. They never lost their temper. It was just the opposite at the house that I left. The temper tantrums were crazy. And I went from that to a very peaceful environment. And I realized this is a nice place to live. This is a nice way to live, to be kind to people, to try to help people. You can't help everybody, yet these people helped as many as they could in town, in school, and things like that. And there was a big aha moment because now I'm 16 years old. I'm a little more aware than I was when I was 12 years old. And I chose to live that way the rest of my life, just to be kind. Now, some people may watch this and say, "Oh, guy's had such a lucky life. He seems like he's always happy." No, I mean, I've had challenges like everybody else. And I believe it's not what happens to us, it's how we react to it and what we do next. That's what makes the difference. So it's not what happens to us because we all go through stuff, but it's how we react and what we do next. So do I get knocked on my butt? Absolutely. As a basketball player, you get knocked on your butt, right? But we have to get back up because that's the game is still going on. So I learned to be resilient. I learned to be thoughtful and kind by watching the family that took me in. And today we're still very, very close. And then I had a great experience. 3 years later, I joined the Air Force. I went to college for a year. It didn't work out. So I joined the Air Force and was stationed in Aviano, Italy. And I started taking financial planning courses because we grew up really poor. And I didn't want that as an adult. I wanted to be really rich as an adult to give more to my family and others. And I met a guy who was on a bombing mission in Vietnam, and his plane was shot at by a missile. He ejected through the canopy, and he woke up in what they call Hanoi Hilton, which is a prison camp in Vietnam. He was there for 5 years. He dropped 90 pounds. And he became my mentor. And one day I was complaining about my past, growing up poor, not great parents, blah, blah, blah. And he said, "Let me tell you what happened to me." And he told me the story I just shared with you. Flying 500 miles an hour, dropping bombs in Vietnam, shot out of the sky, prison camp for 5 years. Here's what he said: "Neil, you're 20 years old. The rest of your life is in your hands. You've got to take responsibility, 100% responsibility. Can't blame it on your parents. It's too late. Can't blame it on the government. You have got to take 100% responsibility about your life and where you want to go." And with that, he said, "Have you ever learned about setting goals?" I said, "No, I have not." So he gave me a cassette tape. Now, this is back in 1978, 79, on goal setting by Zig Ziglar. That changed the trajectory of my life because I just embraced it. I got so excited. I finally knew the steps to setting goals. And I became a jogger and then a runner and then a competitive athlete. And so that was 78. And then 5 years later, I made the Olympic trials by winning a marathon in 2 hours and 17 minutes, all because somebody took the time to share kindness and an interest in my life. So these days, I just like to pay it forward, just as you're doing. I like to pay it forward. It doesn't cost us anything to pay it forward and to help others, like so many help me along the way. So, where does the curiosity come from? That's what you asked me. It comes from all the experiences I've had. It makes me think, how else can I help? How can I be better at what I do? And how much of a difference in this world can I make? Not the whole global world, but certainly a small portion of it. Certainly the lives that I have around here. How many can I touch in a positive way? So that makes me curious.
Thanks for sharing the story. I was in the museum of the Hanoi Hilton in Ho Chi Minh City, and it's
Wow.
for those who have never been in Vietnam, it's really worth taking an expedition on and investigating what happened in that chapter of humanity because it's very interesting. I think if you have a look at what human beings did to each other during that intercourse, you have a more complete understanding of who we are and what we are capable of, both of doing to each other, but also of overcoming. What was his name, if I may ask?
Tom Kirk, Kirk, Colonel Tom Kirk. By the way, Daniel, you'll get a kick out of this because we both have a similar attitude, and that is make the most out of life and make a difference in life. I was speaking in Arizona a year ago, and I called Tom Kirk and I said, I'm speaking in Arizona, and since you live there, I want to come by and see you and your wife. He said, Great, Neil, let's go play golf. He's 97 years old. He plays golf 3 times a week, and he's at the gym 4 times a week.
He's alive.
He is well alive, 97. So, and
Well,
if we,
Tom, if you're listening to this, you're very much invited to the show. It would be my
yeah,
absolute honor to have this.
yes.
Yeah,
Hello, Tom
extraordinary.
Kerr. Yes.
Yeah. What would be this is a bad question, but what do you feel is something he gave you or activated in you or a lesson you learned from this connection?
It is actually a good question. After knowing what he went through as a prisoner of war, there is nothing in my life that could ever be that difficult. So I've run into people over in my career who got a flat tire on the way to work. And they said, Neil, this is going to ruin my day. And I said, well, it's actually only 8 o'clock. How about if you kind of take a breather and at 9, we start the day brand new? Consider what Tom Kirk went through. It didn't ruin his life. And here's the difference that made. There are many people who sadly go through wars and it's terrible with PTSD, the things they see, the things they experience. And Tom went through a lot. And he said, I have to leave that where it belongs. It's in my past. And maybe I'll talk to a therapist and try to get some of this junky stuff out of my brain. And he said, the future, I've got to make the most of. I've got to make up for the last 5 years where I was trapped. I asked him, how did you stay so positive in prison camp? And he said, I played, and he was a saxophone player. He played since he was 5 years old. He said, I played saxophone every single day here in his, because you don't have a saxophone in prison camp. And he said, Neil, there's a book you must read, and that's by Viktor Frankl, right? And you know that one, right? Man's Meaning. How's it? My
Man's
man's
man's search for meaning.
Yes, 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 yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's things like that. It's resources like that that I never would have had access to. I would not be aware of if Tom and I had never met. And we met because I was taking financial planning courses. I happened to join the Air Force, and it was just he he had a profound impact on my life.
Yeah, it's when my father was trained to withstand torture because when you are sent behind enemy lines, they doing all sorts of weird stuff to you to protect their assets, which is the purse, so that they don't give them up and they don't become a liability. And I remember like some of the stories of what these guys went through, and it's almost extraordinary how the human mind is capable of doing brain gymnastic almost to escape the situation. And just that you brought Viktor Frankl up, he is one of those persons who withstand a torturous life also. And one story that comes to mind was he was forced for a while to work as a slave laborer. As in these concentration camps, they worked, and it was their biggest problem was they would, for instance, rip their lips open to put red on their face so that they would look less sick, so that they could continue to work, because those who were unqualified of working were gassed in a way. So it was really rough. And there was one particular situation where it was in the winter, and I don't think it was Auschwitz, it was Buchenwald. He was going through the place where he had to destroy rocks, I think, and his it's funny, my shoes also broken. He's looking at his shoes, and his feet was coming out, and that's a problem because in the ice, then you get frostbite and you have to cut off the toes. And he would have a little bit of bread in his thing, and he would in his mind go over, maybe I can exchange this piece of bread for a new shoe, but then I don't have bread. And then while he was going through this rumination, which was very well justified, he said, I am worrying about the small things. And then he did a very interesting exercise where he projected himself many years into the future, giving a lecture on what he learned about his times in the camps, about human nature and preservation. And then he experienced a sense of warm sensation all over his body, and he said through this meaningful time traveling, he endured the day, and then even found meaning in his time in the camps by helping other people to shift their perspective towards either traveling into the past to find refuge there or into the future. And that's also like some stuff I learned from my father on how to. So if somebody's listening that is going through torture, external or natural ones, is you're always have a refuge in yourself where nobody can touch you. And that's like something I find very powerful, that our mind is capable of leaving the current situation behind and go elsewhere where that situation is not happening. A little bit of a side story. Interesting. So what did you learn from your time in Air Force? That's kind of cool also.
So I had a top secret clearance in telecommunications and communications. And I just found that fascinating. I did not do well in my first year at college because there were five girls to every guy at the college. And I was a social guy. I loved making friends and hanging out and being like a good big brother and all that stuff. And the dean of admissions came up to me at the end of the year. He said, Woody, because my last name's Wood. He said, Woody, we all love you here. You have a great attitude. You inspire people. You encourage, um, but you are not going to be able to go on to year two. You failed your first year. He said, go away, maybe join the service, come back, and start fresh. We'll wipe out your record. And, here I get to the Air Force and I see an opportunity. I could fly to Germany for $10. I could fly anywhere in the world for $10. It was called flight. If there was a flight available or seat available, I was on it. So I traveled extensively. And yet, Daniel, many of the airmen that I was stationed with would sit in the dormitory and watch reruns of Hogan's Heroes and other little movie shows that were from the 60s and the 70s. And I would ask them, why don't you travel? And they said, well, Italian people don't know how to drive. So we just stay here on the base and our assignment's over in 3 years. I'm like, that's insane that there was so much to see in Italy and Germany, and Austria was just a train ride away. I explored. I made the most of my time and I found other buddies to travel with. So four or five of us would jump on a train and go to Austria or Switzerland or anywhere over there. And I learned, and a lot came from Tom Kirk, make the most of your life. He said, the worst thing that could happen to you is 20 years from now, you look back when you were 20 and you think, I can't believe I watched TV 8 hours a day when I could have been exploring. He said, make the most of your life. So I did. I created a gourmet dining club. So every 2 weeks when we got paid, and by the way, we're making $8,000 a year, right? I make that in an hour now. We're making 8,000 a year. So I organized a gourmet club. We'd go to a different restaurant every 2 weeks. It was just fun. So what I learned is about being responsible, making the most of life. We can get more money, but we can't get more time. So as you look at your daily schedule or your weekly schedule, have you maximized your time? Have you done everything you possibly can do? And that's why I got into jogging. And I weighed 165. I was only 5'6". I wasn't in very good shape. I couldn't play basketball like you. You're much taller. And so I did something that put me out in the town. We would travel to different towns and run a 10-kilometer race, 6.2 miles. And there might be 2,000 people in the race, and only 20 people were trying to win. The rest of us were every 2 miles drinking a glass of wine or having a biscotti. That's what it was, a macchiatore, which they also do in Germany, or did. So it taught me a lot about me because I was setting goals. Taught me a lot about getting along with others because in Italy, family's everything. And my grandparents from Sicily, even though I never met them, but family is really important to us. So I learned so much in those 4 years about life, and values and integrity and keeping your promises and setting goals. It was a great learning experience.
It's it speaks to my heart. Isn't it fascinating? Some people are. I remember I was supposed to, in my third year of study, write a statistics exam. I was studying psychology, and my friend, he's one of my craziest friends I had. He did a semester in Thailand to study there, but we all knew he wouldn't go to one course and just be there for the girls, pretty much in a way. And when I saw that, I was like, I'm not gonna do this test. I'm gonna visit him there because that. And I
Yeah.
still remember the feeling of the people I was working with when they saw it was Instagram Day, and on my stories that I was at the airport. It was like somebody escaped prison, and where it wasn't even availability to them, that they could do something else in the summer, but instead of like locking themselves into the library. I love scholars and all these things, but it's what is something you learned on your travels, or how has this changed your idea of who you are, or formed some belief systems? Because for me, traveling has been, it's been that one trip led to me taking a little shit camera. I never learned how to take pictures, but go to people, take pictures of them, and ask them their stories. And I had this idea afterwards where I don't want to be a psychologist in one city. I would rather go around and explore human nature in the field. And that felt to me somehow like a more productive path to understanding what a human being is and becoming one of the best psychologists in the world. And I felt then afterwards, I never really returned to the traditional lifestyle because that was more potent for me in regards to my own studies. And what did traveling did to you, so to say, or for you?
So that's another really good question, Daniel. Here's what I learned. Most people, not all people, I'm not blind like that. Most people are pretty darn nice. And if you treat them with respect. So whatever country I went to, whether it was France, I learned bonjour and how to say thank you and très bien and everything. Every country I went to, I learned how to say thank you, you're welcome, hello, good morning, guten Morgen. I don't know if that was German or Austrian.
It's
Guten Morgen.
German. It's German. It's German. It's
German.
German.
So
Very
whatever.
good.
Think about this. That was almost 50 years ago that I was there.
Yeah.
Some things stay in your brain. And of course, I learned how to say, beer and pretzel, beer mit Pretzen, or something like that. It's been a long time. But again, what I learned is most people are pretty darn nice. If you ask them questions to get to know them and come in with a good attitude, it doesn't mean you have to walk into a bar like Mr. Happy, but walk in and be kind and be friendly and hello to the bartender. And yes, I would like this, please, right? Please and thank you. Two words that a lot of people have forgotten makes such a big difference. Hello in their language. So what I learned is most people are pretty darn nice. And we have similar interests, and that's raising a family and sharing love and being in love. I thought of something, a quote that I learned years ago is there are three things we all need in life: someone to love, something to do, and something to look forward to. And that was one of the things that kept Viktor Frankl going. He had something to look forward to down the road in the future, right? Saw himself or visualized himself doing something else 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So that's what I learned about people in every country. Now, again, not everybody is is cut from that cloth. There are some people who are still bitter and angry and they don't have integrity. But to me, and I'm almost 70 years old, that's a small percentage of people who have a bad attitude and just hate life and maybe hate others. I think most people are pretty darn nice.
And even it's one of the things I struggled with, how to change people who don't want to change themselves. Like that was a thing for me where I had this, I wanted to be the best psychologist in the world for a long time for personal reasons. And I had a conversation with Professor BJ Fogg from Stanford University once, and
Mhm.
he said that to focus on helping those who already want to help. But I've had some conversations with other people retrospectively where they said that the things that you're doing, and not even not successful, I they were where I'm from. I grew up in a very minimalistic setting. They froze a lot of the bank accounts from my father and took them away, so we lost fortunes multiple times over. So there were times of like poverty when I grew up. And for me, I grew up in sometimes in a street where it wasn't so much the deprivation of resources, but it was the like a like a suffocating belief and lack of expectations for everybody who was living in there. It was feeling like there was a dome around you, and it's like it's not allowed for you guys to apply to becoming a doctor or starting a business or doing all these things. And when I met with some of them later, where because I didn't finish all my studies because I became a founder, they said I didn't even know that this was a mode of behavior that was on the menu. And it's like sometimes I think like crazy people like forget that just them leaving the pack away creates a new potential path that others can follow, so to say. And it's like I'm here in Berlin, and it's one of the most famous stories is we had a Berlin Wall here
Yes.
inside of the city, and then from one day to another, after one interview, there was the assumption that you can just go through,
Hmm.
and just people like went through the Berlin Wall, and afterwards, like just other people seeing that the meaning of that wall had collapsed, like suddenly 100,000 people went through, and it was impossible to keep them out, and just those first few people who went through without something happening to them changed the entire narrative of the city. Um, who was, do you think, a jailbreaker for you in regards to liberating yourself from some of the disempowering beliefs that you had for yourself? Because you seem to me also like, in my culture, it's called like a master of the strange, like in being an Abrahamic character who goes from country to country and follows their intuition and walks with God on an adventure, so to say.
Hmm.
Where does that come from?
Daniel, I would have to go back to the books that I read when I was 12 and 13 and all the way through. Um, the things you just mentioned made me think of some of the best athletes in sports, certainly in America. I don't know about Europe, came through terrible poverty and single mother households because the father's gone. And so many people feel stuck, like we grew up poor. I don't have a role model. It's really terrible. But then they see somebody from the neighborhood go off to become a superstar in football or basketball or baseball, or whatever. And they think, wait a minute, there's a way out. I can do other things than what my friends are doing right now that are dangerous and life-threatening. So I found other opportunities by reading these wonderful books by these great authors who have been writing for 40 or 50 years. It puts in your mind there are opportunities. I can stay stuck, which is my choice, or I can look around to say, okay, where's there a door of opportunity? And am I willing to do the work to be successful? Because you just don't go from living in poverty to being a great athlete. You're going to have to practice. You're going to have to visualize. You're going to have your goals written out and be inspired to be great. And you're going to have to work hard. You know that as an athlete like I do. You got to work your butt off and really work harder than you have ever known. So those books that I read shared success stories about people who came from nothing and did something great with your life, or at least something more meaningful. Even if it wasn't great on the world scale, it was something more meaningful than sitting around saying, "Yeah, we're poor," and saying that for 50 years. That'll get you nowhere. Now you made yourself stuck. One of my favorite quotes is by a guy named Jim Rohn, Rohn. He has since passed. He passed maybe 5 or 8 years ago. But I watched him at a seminar in Boston. And I remember him saying, if you don't like the way things are, change them. You're not a tree, meaning you're not stuck in the ground and can't change. If you don't like the way things are, change them. It's your responsibility. So it's hearing things like that when I was young. And by the way, to this day, every morning for 10 minutes, I listen to somebody positive. It could be Jim Rohn or Zig Ziglar or Brian Tracy. Those are guys of my ilk, right? Because we're old. But there's so many others out there. I listen to or read something positive and inspiring every morning for 10 minutes. That gets me going up here. Fuel for the brain, right? So that's where I learned about opportunities. And then when I started jogging, I'd see the same people winning the race every time. And I thought, what do I have to do to win that race? What do I have to work on? And I studied it. I became what a friend of mine calls become a student of the sport. Learn all you can about the topic you want to become excellent at, whether it's in sales or presentations or being an author or a writer, anything of that. Become a student of the sport and research all you can to learn all you can to be the best you can. Because nobody's stopping us, right? Except this thing between our ears. That's stopping us or inspiring us.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that many of these basketball players, and that who went on to become the best players, have a hidden war within inside of themselves that is fueled by deep pain. LeBron James, for instance, he was driven by getting his mom out of the projects in a way. And one of the things that I found with it's something about father figures. For instance, I believe that I have one of the best fathers in the world. And my father didn't have a father. His father like left the family and he was raised by his grandfather. And I have a theory that like sometimes when you don't have a role model, so to say, that you're manifesting an ideal. And there's something that I found with founders, for instance, where they take, if they are successful in their journey of maturation, they take something that has poisoned them in the earliest childhood chapters and almost dedicate a large chunk of their life to turning this into a portion that they share with the community. And I found that when I'm in the room with these people, there's sometimes is they have a public face, but they have a very private face also, where you see that they are almost creating a mirror world around themselves that is very rich in the one thing that they really missed. And it was like maybe for me, for instance, was belief. Like for me, it really hurt me that these teachers just felt that my brain was not investable asset. It just hurt me so much. Where I was like, I'm 16 years old and my life's over. Like that's why this connection with my father was so important for me. I was like, I want every person who follows our civilizational cohort to have access to people of rich in belief, because that's like something I feel is very important. What was something that was lacking, you feel, in your earliest chapters that you made an effort to, that it is abundant around you, around yourself?
Well, you just made me think of a story. Let me just go back to something you mentioned because this is really important and it ties into what my answer is going to be. LeBron James, you're exactly right, wanted to get his mother out of the projects. Right? He grew up not well off, he grew up poor. So he had a why. So I always like to ask folks that are trying to do something better with their life, what's your why? Great. Why do you want to get out of this mess? So going back, as I talked earlier about my childhood, I was really poor and I was embarrassed because we were so poor that when I went to school, I was given a coin. It was a metal coin. So I went through the lunch line to get lunch at school. All they had to do was show them the coin. I didn't have to pay for lunch. When they saw the coin, which I showed discreetly, I could eat for free. I did not like that because I had friends that were really wealthy, and I'd go to their homes and I'd see how their parents were loving and kind, and the house was clean. Uh, I was like, that's what I want. That was my why, because I knew later in life I wanted to be a really a wonderful, encouraging father. I wanted to be a great husband that was home a lot of times to create a life. So I had a why because I had seen what I don't want by growing up in it, and I knew what I did want. So that made a big difference. And the other thing I found is when I studied athletes, I was really lucky. My aunt was a nun, and when I remember when I was 7 years old, she brought books to me about Sandy Koufax, great baseball player, Ted Williams, other great athletes that came from nothing and worked really hard to be among the best in history. So those books really inspired me, gave me stories. So when I started studying top athletes, I realized that the top 1% or top 10% don't train a lot harder. They train a little bit harder than the rest, but it's that little bit that makes a big difference. An analogy I've used in some of my presentations is to look at any golf tournament in the world. Usually the winner wins by one stroke after 4 days of golf in a tournament. Male or female, doesn't matter. So I say, well, the winner just won $10 million. And second place was whatever, right? Let's say 2 million or whatever. That person that won by one stroke, if you break it down between 4 days, was on average a quarter of a stroke better than the rest of the field. And these are the best in the world. These golfers are the best in the world. So the point I like to make with folks is how can you get a little bit better? Don't have to be tremendously better. How can you get one stroke better than you are now? And it's going to take a little more effort. When I was training for the marathon, I'd run 100 miles a week. So on Sunday mornings, it was 20 miles, 24 miles, and I'd fill in the rest. And some of my competitors had said, well, if you're running 100 and you're running under, just over 2 hours for marathon, I'm going to run 150. But they would break down, their body would break down. Right? You think of Michael Jordan and Larry Bird. I think they shot, oh my God, thousands of free throw shots every year, right? Every week they're out there, bam, 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 working on it. Not many people are willing to do that effort to put the work in. That's what made them different. That's what made them better. Is working a little bit harder, a little bit smarter than the others. So those are things that inspired me when I read about things like that. And I think, how could I become a better speaker, a better author, a better dad, right? And it's just doing the little things that make a huge difference down the road.
Yeah, it's one of the things that gives me hope is as a founder, you're for the hardest things about being a founder, probably also for the other adventurers of past civilizational cohorts, is enduring the fog of obscurity and being in the unknown, where you're not exactly sure if what you're doing is working out. And one of the things that always gives me hope is that we're sometimes blind to how close we really are to being a little bit better than everybody else around us. So sometimes it's like one conversation where you learn something, or you get an investor or a new team member, or you get discovered, or all these kind of things. And I find it very interesting that like this Matthew principle, which even in the Bible is prevalent, is like those who have everything, more will be given to them, and those who have nothing, everything will be taken from them. Where
Mm.
it's really useful to discover like what is your thing, like in regards of specializing for that and pursuing that. And for me, being kicked out from school was really a blessing in disguise, because school system is architected in a generalized way.
Hmm.
You have to become a jack of all trades. And for me personally, like through this relationship with my father, I had the choice in what I wanted to study for myself, and could get good at one thing. What do you feel is one thing where you accidentally got early childhood specialized in something that you still do, where you feel,
Yeah, I happen to be fast as a runner.
oh,
I
interesting.
remember we had field day in fourth grade and we had to run, I don't know, maybe 100 yards, and I won by 2 feet. I was like, wow, this is fun because there were some fast kids in my class. And even some of the town races. And I started playing football when I was maybe 11 or 12 years old. And I just happened to be a fast runner, and which helped me as a running back. And where that came from, Daniel, no idea. I don't know. But and then when I got into marathons, I could maintain that pace longer than most. So it was a gift. And there was one other inspiration, which is some people would say, "Oh, that's terrible." I ran a race when I was, let's say, 11 years old in town, 1 mile race, and maybe there were 20 runners, and I came in second. And I came home with my trophy, and my mother asked me, what's that? I said, I came in second place today. And she said, you are such a loser. You'll always be a loser your whole life. Now, some people would let that break them, just like events in life that happen now. You know what that did to me. That really made me mad. I was like, I said to myself, oh yeah, watch this. And I just worked harder and harder and harder. But some people would hear that message and say, uh, I guess I'm a loser. My attitude was, no way, you're wrong. Watch this. I didn't say that because I would have been, punished. But I still remember that today. Whenever I have something, do something successful, and whether I get congratulations or a lot of money or whatever, I think that message inspired me. Now, I don't ever say that to my kids. Never. I always encourage, you're a winner. Oh, look at what you've accomplished. Good for you. You worked hard, you set your goals, and you did it. Right. So that they learn that at 7, 8, and 9 years old.
One of the things I found in that the maybe not the sanest, but the most high achieving people in the world have in common is usually a large vision, the belief that they can accomplish them, and injuries of their psyche at the right parts of it, like something about their self-esteem not being corrected. It's like a story from Mike Tyson, for instance, where Customato would, in one moment, would tell him, "You were sent from the gods, and you're even if you would go to heaven, you beat all of them." And then the next moment, he would treat him like shit and say, "Clean the floor, you're nothing." And it was like these. And Customato was a psychoanalyst, a psychiatrist. I think psychoanalysts, psychiatrists are doctors, psychoanalysts in a way. So he was creating these mind games with each other. And there's one of the things I found is that people who really go all the way and change the world is there's often a strange relationship between having a an educator who had a sense of cruelty and a Mothian element who like installed with them everything is possible for you, but also like a sense of you'll never be enough. You need to work 100 times harder than everybody else. And it's like it's a strange relationship I think between the two that creates this person where they don't have an off button anymore, and then they go for 30 years and become the best in the world. Have you found something different in a way?
Well, thank you for that because I was thinking of Mike Tyson earlier. He came from nothing. He grew up so poor in a rough neighborhood. And what inspired him, I think it was Customato, right? That found him and groomed him. Michael Jordan got cut from the 10th grade basketball team. He said, that felt so awful. I never wanted to feel that pain again and that disappointment. So he worked harder than anybody. To this day, he's a legend. And I don't know when he quit playing basketball, but it's got to be 20 years,
Yeah, he's
right?
a
But he got from the
Mike Tyson story is very fascinating because Mike Tyson was once asked about his son if he can also become a champion. He laughed like, no way. He's a he said why because it's like you didn't live my life. It's like one of the stories. I think it's like one of the most super villain stories I've ever heard. Like he was in the projects, homeless, and he one of the connecting points he to the world were pigeons. And he loved them, and he's like his both his parents were sex workers, so he was on the street at the time, and he didn't have clothes or something, and he found this roof that had a lot of pigeons on it, and he would play with them, but because nobody was taking care of them, his entire clothes was with pigeon shit, pretty much. So his people started making fun of him, and one
Huh.
time, like a couple of groups came over him, and they wanted to mob him, and they saw his favorite pigeon, and they um, broke the neck of the pigeon and punched Mike Tyson with it. And even the other members of that group were, you gotta fight him now. And then he fought him, and he beat his ass. And then Mike Tyson said that's when he learned that he's stronger than everybody. And then everybody started to bring the roughest kids of the neighborhood to fight Mike Tyson for money. And so it's like that's his early childhood chapter. And it's like sometimes you feel how can you teach something like this? Some people are just like accidental early childhood specialization. That's what I call it is, and it's like this kinds of sense of you just can't teach to some people. So I think like nature also has a way in creating certain figures of our time. Um, anyway, darker question maybe. I feel one of the things that helps a man become a man is an encounter with malevolence and our adversity in a way. What was the moment for you, if you may want to share, where you saw some of the darker aspects of life where you faced that and overcame that in some ways? Because I feel this is also a crossroad moment for many people where some grow bitter, other grow better. so to say.
Yes. Growing up poor, with an abusive mother. My dad wasn't abusive. My mother was verbally and physically abusive. And I won't go into great details about getting whacked with a belt, but I remember one time when I was getting hit. That's how my parents punished us. It's hitting us with a leather belt. And I remember one time I get hit so hard and so many times I could not walk for about 3 days because of the welts on my legs. And I said to myself, I will never do that to my kids. I will never be a parent like that because that's not like being a parent. And that just changed my mindset to be a better person and to live a better life and to be a better role model. Those first years are really important as far as transitioning to become a really good person and a kind person, a loving person. When our children did something wrong when they were 5 through 10, all we'd do is look at them and say, now you know better than that. I want you to go upstairs, read a book, come back downstairs and tell us what you learned from the book. And when they were 10, they were reading Dale Carnegie and Norman Vincent Peale. That was our punishment. Go upstairs. I want you to think about what you did because you know you're better than that. And that's all they needed to hear. We didn't hit them. We didn't ground them for a week because nothing comes from that. But they knew we're disappointed. And because we loved them so much and we expressed that so often, like daily, we believe in you. You're such a good boy or good girl. They were raised to have confidence and a high self-esteem, which they have to this day in their 20s and 30s. So that was a major point in my life. Uh, Growing up that poor and beaten so severely that it just I made up my mind how I was going to be. I knew eventually I'd become a millionaire, but more importantly, I'd be a great dad, great husband, and a great man.
Yeah,
That was
it's
big. We talked about, you mentioned something about this earlier. Somebody asked me, now I've given 5,000 presentations in my career. And somebody asked recently, are you a motivational speaker? Do you motivate people to do things? I said, no, not at all. I can't motivate anybody to do anything. And it goes back to your Mike Tyson story. He had fire. And I believe that fire is within. Can't teach it. It's either there and they want to do something great with their life, they're self motivated, or it's not there. Now, I can inspire, like this interview. People are going to learn, but just like you've done with the other interviews, people learn from other people's stories, right? And maybe that inspires them. Like, gee, I've been stuck here. I wonder if I read these books that these people mentioned or learn more about AI or whatever it is, maybe I can get from where I am now to where I really want to be. And maybe that leap isn't so huge. It's not like this, right? Maybe it's just a gradual improvement and then another gradual improvement. So I can't motivate. I can't get somebody off the couch or stop playing Xbox to start living their life, right? At 25. I can inspire with stories about other people who did this. Mike Tyson, Michael Jordan, Tom Kirk, any of these people who were in a real difficult situation and fought their way out of it mentally and physically. So and I love to inspire people. We've talked about the 60,000 thoughts we have every day. 60,000 thoughts, it's estimated. How many of those are positive and encouraging to your self-esteem or your confidence? And how many are degrading? I can tell you how many people I've met and said, "Oh, I wish I could do what you do, but I'm such a loser. I was raised poor, bad parents." I'm like, all right, so now you're 45. You have to kind of let that go. I'm sorry you went through that 40 years ago or 35 years ago. That's got to be your past. And I want you to know your past does not determine your future. It was a tough time and lessons learned, some lessons harder than others. And as Tom Kirk told me, the rest of your life is your responsibility. This guy named Jack Canfield, who wrote The Success Principles and Chicken Soup for the Soul, he grew up poor, parents of alcoholics, and he's become a multimillionaire. And not that he talks about that, he talks about inspiring other people. And One of my favorite books from him is The Success Principles. It's about setting goals and attitude and taking responsibility and all those things. So, my hope is that people read and listen to some of the great interviews you do and think, okay, you know what? I might be only 40. I still have another 40 years of real good brain power. I can make a difference in my life. 40 years is a long time, right? Even if they say, I'm going to bust my chops, I'm going to work really hard and learn all I can in the next 10, 15 years. And maybe I can go from making $50,000 or 100,000. Who knows? Maybe 900,000 or a million. Don't know. Depends on them. But I do believe, firmly believe, the past does not predict your future. It's up to us and that fire inside.
60,000 thoughts per day, and yet,
60,000 thoughts.
and yet, somehow I feel characters are sometimes built upon a single decision we made, sometimes very on. And what you just mentioned to me, the story you shared, where you in the dark made a decision for yourself, like I will not be like this. What do you feel was going through your mind back then? Because it seems that back then you made a decision on who not to be and who to be, and that formed your myth inside of yourself to some degree, in a way. And what
The-
advice would you have maybe to somebody who's sitting in that room right now?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Is this the best you can do? Now, people can lie to other people and tell stories. They can't lie to themselves. And they know if this is the best they can do right now, or can they be better? Can they improve their lot in life? And do they want to? Some people don't. They're like, I'm just going to stay here. It's fine. And those are the folks I cannot motivate. It has to come from within. When I was in the darkest places of my life, I thought about people who live in a really happy, wonderful life. Even if they weren't really rich, they were living a life that was enriched, that they could be proud of. And that inspired me, just seeing that, like Viktor Frankl, looking down the road. I'm not talking, not a physical road, but down the road 5 years, 10 years. If people apply themselves, they can do a heck of a lot in a year. And they can do an enormous amount in 10 years if they're willing to change from where they are to where they want to be. And part of that goes back to what I learned from Tom Kirk and Zig Ziglar. What do you want? I went to a seminar that Jack Canfield put on over by Harvard University. And the way I am is I get to seminars early. I buy the VIP tickets, and I got a ticket. I got the first two seats in the front row. Jack Canfield was 8 feet away from me when he finally arrived, and we got into an exercise later. And my wife was with me, and he happened to choose her as his partner, and I chose somebody else. And the question was, "What do you want?" And the person would answer, and they'd ask again, "What do you want?" And then they'd add on to that answer, "What do you want?" And so my wife started with simple things, and then she said, "I want to write a book." And he said, "What do you want?" "I want a house by the ocean." "What do you want?" And it went on for about 5 minutes. It was fascinating. And it gets people to think real deeply now. Because if you ask them once, it could be Pollyanna. "Oh, I'd love to be a millionaire someday." You got to do more than just want. You got to be willing to work for it. Anyway, flash forward 3 years later, after that event with Jack Canfield, we have a house on the ocean. My wife has written a best-selling book. Everything she talked about, she got her master's degree in mental health, health counseling as a therapist. And everything we talked about that day came to fruition. It goes back to, what do you want? Right? What do you want to improve in your life? And when you start thinking like that, instead of I'm stuck, I'll be here forever, I'd be in this job forever or doing this, you don't need to be stuck. As I talked about with the Jim Rohn's quote, you're not a tree. If you want to do something, get off your butt and go do it because you can. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you have a why. Why do you want it? Right?
When did your authoring career start?
In the late 90s, as an author,
Yes.
yeah, I always wanted to write a book. And Daniel, you know this from experience because you've published many papers. Many people say, "Oh, I want to write a paper one day," or "I want to write a book someday." Well, my attitude, if I'm teaching people about goal setting and living their best life, do it. Don't talk about writing a book, write a book. What I learned, and I did a lot of research on this, if you can discipline yourself to write for 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, at a specific time when your brain works best. I'm a morning guy. My closest friend is a brilliant mind at 11 o'clock at night. I'm in bed. That is not my time. I think you're a bit of a night owl since it's close to 11 o'clock where you are right now, right?
I blame podcast guests like you who live on the other side of the world, and I have to honor my place in the totem pole. So we say 10 o'clock it is, no problem.
So, I thought I want to do what very few people actually do, and I want to write a book. And the first one I wrote was after I attended a class about working smarter, and it was at up in Toronto, Canada. And I was a workaholic, so I was working about 70 hours a week, and yet I was a sales rep, and I didn't have to work that many hours. I decided on the weekends I wanted to compete like I did as an athlete. And I realized that my competitors are probably working Monday through Friday. I was going to work also Saturday and Sunday, at least for 4 hours a day. And I went to this course, and it talked about managing your life, managing your time. And the professor came over, and there were only 15 of us in a class. To attend this class, you had to be making X amount of dollars every year and show your statements. So not anybody could go to this. And he said, when is the last time you took a complete day off? No emails for business, no phone calls, nothing. It had been 7 years. And he said, so, well, tell me, are you a brain surgeon or a heart surgeon? I said, no, I'm a sales rep. Really? And you're not saving lives, but you haven't taken time off. And that day, I got an aha moment that you got to take some time off mentally and physically. And I never worked another weekend again. Or the rest of all that weekend time was for my family. Go play golf, go to the ocean, do hang out, whatever they wanted to do. And that really changed our relationship. And so I worked Monday through half day Friday, and I got so much more done than pushing it off to Saturday and Sunday. And my income over the next 5 years increased to a level I had never seen before. And I was already making a lot of money, but that inspired me to work smarter, not harder. So that was the title of my first book, because I got a real aha moment when I started taking weekends off. I came back to work Monday, Daniel. I was fired up. So the analogy I use is, think of going to the gym every day and doing curls every day, every day, every day. You're going to break down. These muscles will break down. You have to let them rest. I believe the same is for this. You can't be thinking strategically every single day, 15 hours a day. You've got to take some time off. Let it recharge. Do some things that are fun, that you really love with either alone or with your family or your friends or whatever your situation is. So I learned so much that it inspired me to write this book to help others, other workaholics like me, competitive business people. And it was again a real aha moment for me. And I wrote the book because I to this day I want to help others from the lessons I learned. And I don't feel like I failed by working 7 days a week. I learned that there's a better, more effective, and more financially fruitful way to do things. So that changed my life. And just about, well, every book I've written has been to help others learn from my lessons, good and bad, right? I believe that when we try to do something, we either win, succeed, or we learn. I don't believe we fail. I don't like to use that word, that four-letter word. I believe we either succeed or we learn, and then take those lessons and move forward to get better. So that's what inspired me to write that book.
How did you learn how to make money?
There are so many ways to make money. You have to do something you're passionate about and become one of the best in the world, or certainly one of the best in your field. So with what I was doing as a sales rep, I needed to become a better presenter, needed to learn how to build strong relationships, how to listen more effectively. Major problem in certainly in this country, and certainly for sales people. They like to talk. Clients want to make sure that you understand what their issues are and what their goals are, which is why I've been teaching consultative selling for 30 years. And
What is
that
counterintuitive selling?
yeah, consultative selling is me sitting with you as a I don't know you, tell you, Daniel, tell me about your business. What are you trying to accomplish? And by the way, these questions are not rapid fire. This is a conversation like we're having right here, right? So Daniel, you're in financial services and like I am. What are you trying to accomplish in your business? Where do you tell me for 5 minutes or so? Tell me what you want to do. What are your goals over the next 5 years? What do you need to learn to help make you even better at what you do? Um, and if you don't mind, I'm just going to sit here and take notes. And that's consultative selling, asking questions and then listening. So if you think about it, if you wrote the word, I love that you're taking notes, write the word listen, Listen, and then write the word silent, Silent. Same 6 letters in both of those words. They're just rearranged. And we cannot listen unless we're silent. So, as a consultative salesperson, I asked a lot of really deep questions to learn more about you. Because the typical salesperson walks in and says, "Oh man, I've got a product you've got to take a look at." Maybe that's not the way they do it, but they're pushing product. How do I know what you need until I ask and understand? Isn't that like a doctor? When you go into a doctor's office, the doctor's like, "Tell me what's going on. What brings you in here?" And then they zip their lips and they pay attention. Really, how long have you had this? What are you doing for it? So the consultative selling is more like a question and answer. It's not an interrogation. I don't ask you 25 questions. It's more of a conversation so I can understand you. So with that, when I learned how to do that really well, over the next 5 years, my sales were $1 billion because I helped financial advisors bring in more assets because I taught them consultative selling. So they did that with their prospects and clients to get to know them better. And when their clients felt listened to compared to other people trying to sell them stuff, that trust really grew. And they knew they could trust this financial advisor, this sales rep, because the advisor cared more about their life instead of trying to push product. Once I understand what your needs are, if I have the right solutions, I can help you. If I don't, I'll say, I can help you with these 2 things, but these other 3, I've got another colleague who's really good at, in this case, retirement planning or annuities. Let me give you his name and I'll set up a phone call between the 3 of us and let's see how he can help you. I became a trusted advisor, a trusted consultant. And once I did that, I had no competition because nobody did what I did in my territory. Nobody, they were always pushing a product. So it gave me a unique ability to really understand how to help. And that's how people looked at me. I was not a sales rep, I was a trusted consultant. So that's how I grew my career.
How do you
And I,
become trustworthy? How do you become trustworthy as a leader?
what's that?
How do you become trustworthy as a leader?
Keep your promises. If we're meeting today, right, Monday, and you say, Neil, there's something I have a question for and I need an answer to. And if you ask me the question, I don't have the answer. I will say, Daniel, may I get back to you on Wednesday? I want to check with my colleagues to get the right answer for you. You'd say, oh, sure, Wednesday's fine. Do you know what I would call you? Tomorrow. Under promise, over deliver. Most people would say, I'll call you Wednesday, and they call you next week. Oh, and they suffer from that terrible disease called excusitis. Excusitis, right? Oh, I meant to call you, Daniel, but I got really busy. I had to get my car repaired. When I make a promise to you, I keep my promises. I go above and beyond keeping my promises. And when I continue to do that, I prove that I am trustworthy because if I say something, it's my word and it will get done. Not a lot of people do that. And look at your own life in terms of the people you associate with. How many truly keep their promises? I don't know. Maybe there are more than I see now, but most people will just yes you to that. Oh, yes, I'll get that to you. Yes. I call it yesing people to death. They don't follow through. So one of the things that I taught all, I mean, I've trained 50,000 salespeople. I teach them follow through, keep your promises, be a good listener, pay attention, take a genuine interest, an authentic interest in what your clients need, and then provide it. It's really that simple. Just many people were never taught or they don't want to learn. They'll say, I've been doing this way for 10 years. My question is it working out? If it's not, make a change. So my clients always appreciated that. And to this day, I can call clients I knew when I lived in Ohio back in the 90s. And we pick up the phone like we haven't spoken in a year. Hey, how are you? What's going on? It builds wonderful, trusting relationships. The other thing I would do is when we get to know each other a little bit, I'd learn their birthday and their anniversary and the children's names. And I'd take notes like you're doing there. I had notes on every client. So when I called it, say, you told me you guys were going to go to Venice and then, other parts of Italy. How was your trip? I didn't come in and say, hey, I want you to buy something today. I got to know them personally and take a real interest in them. And they were grateful for that because most people were just trying to make a lot of money. My goal was to help my clients achieve their goals. And with that, I made plenty of money, more than I could ever imagine. But I did that because I put my clients first. I put their needs first. And when you help enough people reach their goals, you will reach your goals financially. I know it may sound like Pollyanna, but it's just the way it works.
It's I had the benefits of learning. I didn't know what sales. I didn't have many. I was learning sales before I knew the word sales. I didn't even. I had one time where my co-founder was telling me we need to write a deck and we need to put the titles for each person on. I didn't, and then he said CEO. I said like, what does this stand for? He's like, I didn't know, so I don't come from a strong entrepreneurial background. But when I learned at the university about behaviorism, behaviorism is you have so like you do arithmetics with people you because you can't you when you're a behavior therapist, and I've written over 100 books on like workbooks on this where I was helping people to overcome habits and beliefs and thought patterns, and it never worked if I would just tell them like, can you stop doing that, or if I would use shame or guilt, then they wouldn't book me anymore. I said, ah, fuck this, I need to find a way. And then I found some how the old guys were doing this, and you would listen like a Rogerian therapist first, which is like you're not allowed to speak until the other person is finished. You accompany them through their journey with full body listening. When they are finished with it, it's like being handed over with the painting, and you don't criticize it. You just describe what you're seeing and ask if you're understanding it currently. And then you ask a curative question onwards that sparks the dialogue with something that is ideally not fake interest, but more something like something you actually care about that you feel would make these things better. And when you like get into the hard sales part, you ask a question that helps them to see the image better. For instance, like you have a problem. Oh, interesting. What is this problem costing you right now? And for me, I would, for instance, had to go even deeper because most people didn't like themselves very much to say, okay, so if you continue this drug addiction, it's your health is degenerating, but we've identified this is not important. What if your dog wakes up Tuesday and he has nobody anymore who takes them out? I say, well, that would suck. And then I could get them through these um, escalation of questions by investigating the broader impact or what it would do in the future to people that would love to change their behavior. And that was somehow very useful for me in sales later on when somebody would have a sales problem. But what is costing you right now? So we don't have sales problems right now. And then you can ask these questions and help them say, actually, it would be a priority to solve this. Follow-up question for you, however. Um, Something that is not being taught to modern salespeople that is of absolute essential importance. What would you say that is?
Consultative selling and building relationships, authentic relationships. And those two really matter. I told you that I would ask my clients their birthday and anniversary. One day, and this is years ago, I called my friend Luigi in Providence, Rhode Island. I said, Luigi, you've got to be so excited. I called him on Monday. I said, you've got to be so excited. This Friday is your 25th wedding anniversary. He went silent. He said, oh my God, I completely forgot it's my wedding anniversary. Do you know how much trouble you just saved me? I said, well, I'm on your side and I know this is a very special day. I'd call people, my clients, first thing in the morning. Daniel, happy birthday. I hope you have an awesome day. Next time I'm in town, let's grab a bite to eat for lunch. And that was it. I never asked for sales. I didn't ask for business. I called because I genuinely cared. Not most people get, I think the number is 3 to 4 birthday calls every year. Most people, right? They heard from mom or dad or brother or sister, whatever, so spouse, if appropriate. I made sure I called my top clients every year. People were like, you remembered. I said, well, birthdays are pretty special to me. And I called to just wish you a good day and enjoy another trip around the sun. That was it. But I did it because I cared. I didn't do it because I was going to say, hey, now that I have you on the phone, I should tell you. I didn't do that. I called because I cared. So if more people can learn about relationship building, and keeping promises and consultative selling, again, like a doctor does, it makes business so easy. I consider most of my clients, most of my best clients, dear friends. I get invited to weddings and birthday parties and to go fishing or to go play golf or whatever because I listen and I care and I try to be fun to be with. And if most salespeople could learn that, they'd say, "Oh my God, this is the easiest business in the world." Because it truly is. When you take it from that perspective, instead of I have to sell stuff, that perspective won't get you far. You'll sell stuff, but they won't sell nearly as much as I have.
I had a mentor once, or mentor, I don't like the word mentor, a friend. It was my psychology professor, Dr. Ivina Reitenbach. If you're listening to this, shout out to you. We also need a podcast episode soon. And we were walking through the city and she busted my ass for something I didn't do. There was a homeless person and I didn't look into the eyes of the person, just passed her, and she slowed me a little bit down and said, we exist through others. Even if you don't give money, acknowledge that person. And in that moment, I was very much in my entrepreneurial mode. I was, for instance, buying stuff at the supermarket, and I didn't get my earplugs out. I didn't make much of it, but she really busted my ass. And then she told me a story that really taught me something about psychology. Do you know the story of the devil child?
No.
It's a very interesting story, very harsh one. But there was a child who, in psychology, is a well-known cautionary tale about the power of attention and the cruel nature of negligence. And there was a child who, for a while, was also a foster child, who was thought to be evil, and they thought it was evil because he was always torturing animals, and when the parents went out home, he was trying to attack, so to say, the other foster sibling. And at the beginning, they thought like this is like they thought like it's the teachers thought, hey, this is just an evil person, she's rotten and you can't do anyways. When they did some research with cameras, they found she was abused in her former home. And in this new home, she noticed that when she was doing something awful, the parents would rush to her side. And she associated safety with that immediate attention. And she just didn't know how to have an authentic conversation because she was so young, on how to get these parents around herself. And that really taught me that it's like we are not just um, machines who think in plus benefit, but it's really the connection to other people that fuels behavior and that functions as a reinforcement for us. And I always that's always stuck in my mind, where it's like, don't be so fast to think that the person you're talking to is just buying a solution like a computer would. There's other things that are important to human beings in a way.
That's interesting. Daniel, it makes me think of something many of us talk about is we don't know what we don't know. The devil child didn't know that if he or she were kind and thoughtful and loving and playful, he would they would still get plenty of attention, but they associated being awful, the awful behavior getting attention. There were other ways to get that. Going back to what you asked me about sales, there are other ways to grow your business than pushing what you want to push. Instead, say, how can I help? There are a lot of things, a lot of products out there. What do you need? Let's just talk. That's a much better, wholesome approach and much more effective.
One of the things I'm also interesting is for me, closing is the act of making an ask at the end of a conversation and handling in the aftermath, so to say. And I would say, like, because it took me a long time I showed you what we were building, took me a long time to get to this point where we even have something sellable. So I got stuck a little bit in the building relationship, but at some point, you will starve if you might make an ask. If you give a masterclass on how to ask people for purchasing behavior or for money, and how do you close people, or is there even like something wrong with the description of this part of the conversation?
No, you were asking a really good question. So let's role play. If I have just sat with you, did the consultative selling, building trust, asking compared to where you are now, where do you want to be in 5 years? When we finished and I have everything I need to provide some solutions, my question to you would be, how soon would you like to make this happen to bring you closer to your goals? And you'll tell me I'm ready right now. Okay, let's wrap this up. What is there anything else you need to know for us to move forward and make this happen right now and sign the contract or whatever it is? Or you'll say, I need I need 2 months, or I need 6 months, or based on what you told me, I'm not ready right now. I'd say, Daniel, I get it. No worries. When you're ready, give me a call. If you don't mind, I'd like to keep in touch with you. If I hear anything pertinent to your background and what you're looking to accomplish, do you mind if I keep in touch? I call it keep in touch marketing. And they'd say no. But going back to my first scenario, if you said, I am ready to wrap this up right now, let's get going. I'm so excited to see how much we can accomplish in the next 1, 2, and 3 years. I'd say, okay, I'll get the paperwork to you this afternoon, or I have the paperwork here, whatever it is, right? So that's what I call not a hard close, like, come on, we're gonna get this done, because that won't work with me. If somebody said that to me, red flag, a shield comes down to protect me. If someone said, what else do you need before we get this wrapped up? What else do you need to know? I'd say, I am totally good, or I'd tell you. So to me, it was a lot like dating when I was single. I can take a yes or no if I'm going to ask a woman out for lunch, but I need to know. I can take a yes or no. My life will continue going on because I never had a date with her before. So it's not like I lost anything. And it's the same thing with a client. I want to know, have I answered everything, every question you have to make you feel really comfortable about moving forward right now? And
If you
then,
could if you could share one dating secret with to the guys who are listening to this, from a sales legends, where we use some of the skills you've accumulated for an equally important part of life, and we would arm these guys with something,
well,
what would you equip them with?
it's so interesting. I don't think I put this in my bio. I wrote a book in 2014. I co-authored with a friend, Dating Success After 40. And it was a bestseller on Amazon. And a lot of it talks about knowing, remember I talked about Jack Canfield. What do you want? As males or females, we have to know, what are you looking for in a date? Do you want somebody active? Go to sports events, go for a run on the beach, or whatever. Or do you want somebody who likes to watch TV 10 hours a day? Because those two won't mix. If I'm a real active guy and somebody prefers to watch TV for 10 hours a day, it's just not going to work. So it brings you down to really ask, what do I want? What do I want for height? Well, it's like going to the supermarket, and I mean it this way. You got to know what the heck you want. And in terms of personality, do you want somebody outgoing? Or would somebody outgoing drive you bananas because you're more of an introvert? So it takes time to really look at what do I want, age, interest, looks, build, all those things are really important because it creates a bond. And you have so much more in common when you find out exactly what you want. And the other thing I see men really fail at is going on their first date and complaining about the last person they just broke up with. 'Cause I've seen both men and women do that. For the men that want to be a really great date, ask her about her. Tell me about your life. What are you doing these days? Right? And then hearing it and then asking another question. How'd you get into that? Most guys want to talk about themselves out of insecurity. A woman wants you to learn about her. So if you become a good listener, as we talked about earlier, silent and listen, right? It sets you apart from all the other guys out there. And then, take your time. I believe the more time you can share, which is why I never dated anybody that lived 5 hours away. I want to meet for coffee. I want to go for a walk. I want to maybe meet for early dinner, whatever it is. So if you date somebody closer in proximity, you can share. I don't say spend more time. You can share more time to get to know them and see if it's a fit. And it will be or it won't be. So part of that book we wrote was also there's a chapter on not getting scammed on dating sites because there are many people, women who receive a call or pardon me, an email
I need
on
to
the,
ask this question so that you can answer. So I make a segment of it.
yeah.
How do you not get scammed by girls as a guy, or how do
Oh,
you?
that's a great question, Daniel. And here's why. Um, I found a woman on one of the dating sites, which I won't name, and I sent her a message and said, "We live about 20 miles apart. Let's go for a walk on the beach." Sure, I'd love to. And I said, "When? How about this Saturday?" And I kept getting no, no, no. And I said, "Well, you know what? Hey, thanks anyway. It sounds like you're really busy." And she said, "Actually, I have fallen in love with you." Now, we never met. "I have fallen in love with you, and I live in Russia, and I need you to help me get a passport, and I need $10,000 for a flight to the United States." To which I replied, "Good luck." It was a scam. So there are a lot of scammers on there reaching out to women, especially widowed, when they put that in the title, who say, "I've fallen in love with you" after 3 months. They've never met, they've never had a Zoom call. It's all correspondence with email. And they'll say, this happens all the time. "I own a construction company in Sweden. I'm a multi-billionaire, but my money's tied up. Will you send me $50,000 so that I can plan a trip to come see you?" Once you wire that money, it is gone. So what I encourage people to do, and I hate to share these negative stories, look up catfishing and you'll understand what this is. So a woman reached out to me 3 years, well, this is before I was married. So let's say 10 years ago. And she said, "My mother fell in love with you. We have your pictures all over the house." I said, "Well, I have no idea who your mother is." She was actually in Berlin, in Germany. And she said, "No, no, we have all the emails from you." I said, "I don't know who you are. I don't date, I'm not dating anybody. I'm not on social media." And so she took a picture of me, Googled it, put it in Google Photos, and she said, "Oh my God, you live in Boston. You don't have a Spanish accent or Nigerian accent." I said, "No, I don't." Somebody created a profile on one of these websites, dating sites, using my photos.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and this woman fell in love. They write great letters. "You're the most amazing woman I've ever met," but they never met. So, unfortunately, there are some scammers. That's why I say date within like a 10 or 20-mile radius. That's it.
Yeah, and
So,
even like now with AI, it's a scamming. It's like there's a whole new level of scammers coming up where it even
absolutely.
has your voice, your style is very difficult. But let's not go into that. Um, I feel also one part of becoming a person is forgiving yourself.
Yes.
I've had a conversation today with my great friend. I don't want to call his name, but he's going through the Himalayas right now. He's a very successful entrepreneur, and he impregnated a girl who was a stripper, and they decided to have an abortion. And now he has a moral crisis in a way because he comes to the conclusion: I have the money, I could have taken care of it, and it may not be the right person, but how do I come back from that? And I kind of realized also that part of the human experience is that we have all made unredemptive mistakes and are forced to live with it. What is a moment in your life maybe where you had to forgive yourself for something, you don't have to name it or something, but where you had to
Yeah,
let go for something that was personally difficult for you, but that led to you becoming a more mature or complete person?
there were some things in my life, especially earlier in my life, where I've made some mistakes and I beat myself up mentally for a long time until I spoke to somebody who said, Neil, we all make mistakes. If you can forgive yourself and say, I didn't know better, my intentions were not to commit harm. I'm only human and I will continue making mistakes on occasion. And I learned a lesson. I'll never do it again. I found that gives me a lot of peace. We are all going to make mistakes. We don't know what we don't know. We learn from those terrible blunders. It doesn't make us a bad person in most cases. Now, the people you talked earlier about, the pedophiles and the murderers, that's a whole different league. That's not the mass population. The 90% of us or 95% of us, we're going to make mistakes. And forgive yourself when you can. Get over it. Never do it again. And apologize. I've apologized and said, I am so sorry that I hurt your feelings. And it was not my intention. And I hope you can forgive me.
It, there,
We
there's
can,
a there's a beautiful notion. It's but even to those who did worse things, it's like one of the stories from, I think it's from the Old Testament that yeah, I've thought probably like a year. I think I thought 1 or 2 years about that story. It's a story of, I think her name is Rahab. It's a prostitute in a city in that particular story, and it's about is it Isaac? There's like some prophet who's being persecuted while a failed attempt to take a city and liberate it from a tyrant. And then there's this prostitute, and everybody like leaves their doors closed and won't hide their prophet. But it's her who lets this guy hide from the totalitarian authorities and saves his life, and consequence like gave refuge to somebody who would change the nation. And I'm always so interested by just keeping the door open that even as the worst person in history, if you still have some time left to be on this earth, maybe there is still some impact where you can do something extraordinary. Now, does this redeem yourself? I'm not sure, but I found it interesting that the potential for salvation may never be fully gone, and that's something to hold on to in this regard, in a way. Um, what state are you in right now?
Massachusetts. So we're,
What is America like? Let's talk briefly about the where political happen. What the fuck is going on in the United States right now?
oh dear God. Did you see the video that he posted the other night of him piloting a plane? AI created it. Him piloting a
Okay,
plane.
so Donald Trump posted a
Yes.
video of. Can you share that story?
Yes, Donald Trump posted an AI generated video of him as a pilot in a jet, a bombing jet, and as he flies over the people who are doing the No King's Day, instead of dropping bombs, he drops crap, feces, shit on not the protesters because they weren't protesting. They were having a peaceful march saying no kings. We don't want a king. We don't want an authoritarian. We don't want what happens in our country as what happened in Germany with the Nazis and the Jewish. This is not how we live here. And so it shows him flying around just dropping shit, pardon the French, on all these people marching. It was in what other country in the world would a leader do something like that? It's insane.
We spoke about relationship management. Like you as an expert for this part of the psyche in a way, what went through your mind when you saw the leading force of your nation doing this? I'm not I'm neutral. You know that the platform that I'm building, I'm thinking in generations, and I feel every human story should be preserved for eternity, and we all have a unique experience of life, and thus I don't really partake in any kind of parties or something. And also didn't help that everybody from my like that governments always try to take stuff away from my family, so I don't like any kind of government what to say. But you as somebody who's there, what do you feel this did to the climate, and what do you feel is the solution on how to come back together for your nation a little bit? Because it feels that there's something you guys are going through right now.
First of all, Daniel, I'm embarrassed as an American that somebody in a leadership position that should be bringing people together and uniting to make things better in our country, which I think the country's doing well already, the leader we should be proud of. As somebody who really leads, he is divisive. He's separating people. They have a federal law force now called ICE, right? The immigration group that are ripping people out of cars only because they're not white. They're different color than him. And he's trying to make our country a white country by shipping these people to foreign countries, foreign jails like Argentina and perhaps Chile and Africa. They have been in this country 20 years or more, picking vegetables, working in hotels, dishwashers, doing things that most Americans don't want to do. Most people don't want to pick vegetables. It's hard work. So he is picking up anybody that's not white colored and physically ripping them from cars, handcuffing or zip tying their children. This is not how we were raised. So he's unfortunately a narcissist. He has dementia. He's not well. And from his history, just looking at his history, and I was never Democrat or Republican when I was growing up, just looking at his history, he has hurt so many people throughout his career, and he takes no responsibility for it. If you look at the people he hired to be around him, they don't have the courage to say, that is wrong. You can't do that. That's not how we treat fellow Americans. He has surrounded himself with sycophants. People just say, okay, whatever you want, Donald, I'll do it. Whatever you want, we'll do it. And they're angry and this is a sad time in our history. 10 years from now, books will be out. 5 years from now. And many people write, how did you let that happen? So there are a lot of angry people in our country. These beautiful marches on Saturday, very, very peaceful. Nobody was fighting. They were just saying, we want our country back. This is not how we are. And so to answer your question, what has to happen? Hopefully the Republicans in the Senate and the Congress say, we've had enough. He's not well. We need to take him out of office. And J.D. Vance will take over, who I don't know if he's ever been a leader. His history shows no, but he just has to be removed from the presidency. He's not well, and it's sad.
You are, I feel when you're learning sales, you're also learning politics by default.
Mhm.
A little bit. What are some tactics you've seen this government or this, let's talk about individuals. This individual, you said like he's divisive, for instance. I feel like when you've had thousands of hours on teaching people how to sales and sales is also, it's persuasion also, right? You're leading people towards thinking in a different way or another way. It's a tremendous amount of power also. What do you feel is the tactic that he's been using? And if it's a follow-up question, you would write the standard operating procedure on how to resist tyrants
Yeah.
and their persuasive tactics, both from all kinds of parties. What would you help these people with? Because you strike me as a free-minded person, actually.
Yeah. The if you listen to him talk about people he opposes, people he wants to put out of politics, he will say, he has a very low IQ. You can't trust him. Look at what he did with this and this. And he will lie and make stories up that never happened. But he's known to be a liar. There was an example, let's say a month ago, he spoke for an hour and there were 100 lies in what he said in 1 hour. So in history, no president has ever lied like that. We tend to hire good people with good, strong leadership skills, with integrity and morality. Remember, he's a convicted felon in so many ways, legally convicted felon who should not be in office. So he does not bring people together. He'd say, "Oh, I was on somebody's podcast. That guy's an idiot. This guy is one of the best podcasters in the world." But he puts people down with criticism instead of encouraging and bringing people together. Now, he has a lot of Republican voters that voted for him that he's speaking to. And he's talking about, if we have to get violent, we will get violent. And he's energizing the people who put him up on a pedestal as a king. And it's just causing a lot of conflict in this country. And fortunately, people are getting sick of it. But it's not easy to get a president out of that role. So yeah, I never wish any bad ill on him. I know we've had assassinations. We never want to see that. There, I hope, are better ways to just relieve him of duties because he's getting mentally ill.
You're an author too. There was an assassination attempt of an author recently in the United States. What was his name again?
Oh, Kirk.
Kirk. Yeah.
Yeah,
What,
terrible.
what do you feel? Because on my way here to our conversation, like my main goal with Alexandrians, the platform that we're building, is to preserve the authors and make them uncancelable. And I was on my way here. I'm in Berlin. It's full with little ancestral artifacts that hold tremendous messages to you. And there's one floor, for instance, in front of, it's called Lustgarten. And there's a little hole in the floor, and it has glass in it, and it has empty bookshelves, and it's a reminder for all the books that have been burned by the National Socialists. And some of the books are from my favorite psychologists, like Freud, for instance, and other people. What do you make of the current trend in the United States that there seems to be an censoring movement happening, sadly, strangely also from both sides in a way? So it's like, it seems like there's just a climate of a culture war going on. What did this scene did to you as an author yourself with strong opinions, and what do you feel, where are you guys going?
Many people are comparing this to Nazi Germany. It's just terrible. These brown people that Trump refers to, many have been here a long time. Now, granted, they didn't get a passport. They're living kind of under the radar. They're not drug dealers. If he wants to get rid of the drug dealers and the violent gangs, get rid of them. I'm good. But the mother and father who have been working in a cleaning service or in a restaurant in the kitchen, who've done no harm and they've worked for a living to make ends meet, then I don't see why they need to be deported to other countries or arrested. It's sad to see this happening right now.
One challenging question for this is, and there's an ongoing debate in Germany also in regards to leadership, where it's like, we are a multicultural country also, and it causes like there's a quote from Niccolo Machiavelli I find quite interesting, which is that if your army consists of more than 50% of mercenaries, in times of war you won't be able to defend the nation because they will leave in some ways. And it seems that like many countries have lost the core identity of who they are, and we are kind of like haven't really figured out how to live with each other yet and preserve national identity without going to a hardcore nationalism. And we also quite haven't figured out this new identity we seem to want to transfigure into, which is like this mutual cultural coexistence in a way. If you would, as a wise person, describe what the Western nation is going through right now, like more like in regards to us growing up, what would be your diagnosis for what's happening to us right now?
Well, I remember being in sixth grade when our history teacher would talk about America as the great melting pot. We welcome people from other countries. Think about this. Two of Trump's three wives are immigrants. His current wife and his wife who sadly died. Two of his three wives are immigrants who came to this country through special process. And I find that fascinating that he's trying to send all the immigrants home. So we were known as a melting pot. Come on. Well, we'll help you get jobs and we encourage you to work and support your families and be part of our community. And he's trying like hell to change that violently right now because of the federal police force he's put together, ICE, are all wearing the masks. That would never be allowed with police in our country. You have to show your face. You build community relationships in the community so people know they can trust you and like you. Unless you're a criminal, then you're not going to like them. But this federal group that Trump's team has put together are just so violent. It's just Daniel. It's hard for me to talk about because it is not the way we were raised.
Before we move to the last chapter of the podcast, you've written an awful lot of stuff over your life. Which is your favorite child, so to say, out of your books?
The best practices of successful financial advisors I like the most because I share stories and examples of successful people
Can
and
you say
kind.
the name again so people can buy it?
Yes, the best practices of successful financial advisors. And I published that also in 2014 and have sold at this point about 15,000 copies, which is good for a writer. It's good for an author to write. And it's filled with stories, success stories, best practices, consultative selling, how to build really strong, meaningful relationships with your clients, and how to make a positive difference in the world each day. So I like that, and the feedback from that has been really powerful. I should tell you, I don't write books to become a millionaire. I write books to make a difference. And if my books can inspire somebody, because every one of my books has a portion on inspiration and goal setting and visualization and living life to the fullest. I don't write them to get rich. That's not important to me anymore. I've made lots of money in my career. I want to make a difference. And go on.
What does feeling gotta what does getting rich feel like as somebody who was poor before?
Pretty damn good. To be able to say, okay, which house do you want to my significant other? And money's not an issue. Compared to what I grew up in, pretty damn nice.
I'm in this weird spot, Neil, where I was homeless many times in my life, like in as a consequence of my entrepreneurial pursuits, and I know what it means to have no food. I'm like going to probably raise my $5 million in 2 months at a evaluation of like 20 to 40 million. This is very strange for me because the even though you hold on to this idea of who you will be, when that actually happens, it's a surreal experiences. How did you transition from trying to make it to recognizing I've actually I've become rich, so to say, for yourself?
It's more pride than anything. My personality hasn't changed. I'm still kind. I'm still a good listener. I care about my neighbors. I obviously care about my family. It hasn't changed my personality, but there's a comfort level to know that we have so much in the bank. We have some really wonderful investments. We have our dream home along the ocean. I'm watching boats out here and surfers and I could throw an apple into the ocean from our home. There's a lot of pride there. And I think back to the things I said I would do when I was 13 years old, I've accomplished. So again, it comes back to pride. My personality, my friendships, None of that has changed. I still I treasure kind people with integrity and people who love life and try to make a difference every day. Those are my what we call here peeps, my people. Those are my peeps. Nothing's changed. So I still hang around with only people with integrity and a love of life and a passion. There are no miserable, angry people in my life because I don't have time for that. That's just life is too short. You got to choose who you want to be around with, right? And I always tell people or encourage them after you've met with somebody, do you feel inspired and encouraged, or do you like, oh my God, this girl has so many problems. Every time I meet with her, she's like, I'm draining my battery. So those are the type of people I hung out with. I enjoyed people like that. It doesn't mean my friends don't call and say, I've got something to go over with you because I'm really troubled. I need your help. Sure. Right? That's our closest friendships, right? We help each other out. It's just that for the people who complain every single day, I don't have time for that. I like to be around people who have hope and goals and a good work ethic and care about others. So
What
I
what
can change.
what is the name of this big investor from? It's there are two these old people from America. What are
Warren Buffett,
Warren Buffett and who else? What is his name? The other guy?
Charlie Munger, I think it
Warren
is.
Buffett and Charlie Munger had a great. There was a great. I love the old interviews of Charlie Munger where he just sits and you can see this guy has no concern in the world. He's just mastered his psyche in a way where there's no problem that can out him. He said that he and Warren hated complainers
Yeah,
like in the past, and he said one of the terms they used was in times of adversity. Warren and I always made an emphasis of soldiering through it,
right.
and I love that. Like, what is your personal antidote for getting out of complaints and into setting a course for action?
First of all, they have to want to. Some people love to complain. They get so animated doing that. The problem is, and it goes back to what I learned when I was 20 years old, they haven't taken 100% responsibility for their life. They're blaming everyone else, the government, my neighbors, my parents, my grandparents. You've got to get to a point in life where it's you're responsible. You've got to own it and say, you know what? I don't work hard enough. I spend too much time wasting time watching TV. I've been in a job I haven't liked for 20 years. Change. But for the people who don't want to take responsibility, they will complain and point fingers every other direction. Just, and by the way, we talked about this earlier. I cannot motivate them because they don't have fire inside. They don't want to change. I can't change people like that. But I'm not a motivational speaker. I'll share inspiration and success stories. If somebody asks, what would you do if you were me? And this was my goal, I'll gladly brainstorm and collaborate with them. I won't listen to complaining.
If all of your you would if you would get like 50% of all of my earnings for the rest of your life and you could teach me one thing about money, like what would you choose to teach me? Where it's like it's really you have some stakes in the game, you're an investor in my fortune, and you are like, you gotta get this right because this investment will affect your family also and your family in the future.
It's and Munger and who do we just Buffett will tell
Buffett.
you you've got to invest. You've got to invest in either real estate or mutual funds or whatever. And each month when you get paid, you've got to make sure I'm going to pay me first. Me being I'm going to invest in my life. Whatever the investments are, whatever you're comfortable with. I'm not a crypto guy because I can't touch it. I don't understand it and I can't explain it. So that to me is just foreign. I've been investing in mutual funds since I was 19 years old, and I'll be 69 next month. So, I've been doing that consistently. Here's what I find the problem is, however, people get paid. It's like, oh, I want new clothes. I want new TV. I want. Before they know it, at the end of the month, they've run out of days before they've run out of money before they've run out of days. So it's important to just have the discipline to say, let's create a budget. How much can we spend after we invest? right? Every month we're going to invest, 15% of what we make, and that money gets left alone. We don't touch it. Then we have our bills, the monthly bills. But when you look at a budget broken down, auto payments, cars, all that stuff, not cars, but mortgage or rent, and then you look at the bottom line, we call that, what's your monthly nut? What's the nut? What do you have to pay every month that is a mandatory must pay? And then what do you have left? And investments to me is a must pay.
It's I'm very blessed to have these kinds of conversations because they really change me, and this conversation has really changed me. And in my last podcast, I had David Vertigo on. He is a best-selling author for Wealth Transition. Grew up very wealthy, and he just said this one thing where I was like, I advise families on how to families have intergenerational wealth so that the burn rate of one generation doesn't affect the next one. I'm like, what? People, I'm like, on Tuesday I have no food. Like that's how I grew up. I was like, fuck, we need to steal something. And it was just the thinking that like people have like budgets for the entire generation. Like that was such a mind blowing to me. Where it's like there's just people who are very good at these things and who are not affected by the same storms. And that this may be something worth mastering or at least learning about. Anyway, I know we are running out of time. I would love to have the Alexandrian questionnaire with you and then leave you up, hopefully, to more important things than this conversation. Is
Well,
that
by the
fine?
way, I've enjoyed this conversation tremendously. So,
Likewise.
well, thank you.
Likewise. Okay, it's a couple of questions. Just speak from your heart. Some can be quick answers, others you may be able to pause and reflect. Let's go. Favorite question you have?
How did you get from where you are now to where you were in the beginning?
What's your favorite word, Neil?
Inspire,
Least favorite word?
complain,
Book that changed your life?
Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
A quote you're trying to strive to live by?
The more people you help succeed, the more successful you'll be.
If you could resurrect three authors or leaders from history to add to your personal board of advisors, who would they be and what would be a question you would throw into the room for yourself?
Wow, Norman Vincent Peale, the power of positive thinking. I would love to chat with him. And I would I didn't know much about Churchill from Great Britain, but he seemed like a great leader. I'd love to chat with him. And another author, it'd be Napoleon Hill. I mean, he grew up poor and he was sponsored by Andrew Carnegie to write Think and Grow Rich. And this was after the 1929 stock market crash, the 1929 stock market crash in America. And Andrew Carnegie, the richest man on earth, said, I will put you in front of anybody in the world you want to interview. Ask them how they became successful. And he got in front of Henry Ford and all the great inventors and statesmen and politicians, Henry Ford, and all those guys. And that's where the book Think and Grow Rich came from. How do you get that right attitude to be successful? So, with that, if I could get those three at a dinner table at our home, I would ask them, based on what you see in America right now or in the world right now, what 3 points of advice would you give people to turn things around in a more positive light and get us on the right path? That's and I not just zip my lips and just listen.
What do you think they would say?
We need to unite, especially in this country. We need to get a vision that has people looking forward to something. And I think I mentioned this earlier. We all need the three things in life, right? Something to do, someone to love, and something to look forward to. And right now, there's just in our country, there's too much disarray, there's too much animosity and clashing. If we could get a leader that says, here's where we are, here's where we're going to be, and this is what's in it for you and your families. I believe we have enough positive energy in this country if we could just channel it. It's like oil underground. There are a lot of reserves. We just need somebody to get it out and put it in the right direction. That'd make a difference.
I had on my last podcast, 3 episodes, Dr. Hank Rubin. He's a best-selling author from America also, and we talked about this, the importance of having a vision for America right now. And maybe that America also needs a new, like, or United States needs a new question for under what vision could we potentially unite? Because it feels that you guys, to me, are asking the question of how do we take out the other party in a way. And I feel like if you're aiming at each other, you're blind to the potential adventure you can partake in mutually. And if you would do that, I just find this very interesting because my country also doesn't have a vision right now in a way, because we're traumatized from visionaries from the past who've pointed the way into the wrong direction, so to say. Anyway, an author that comes to mind when you think of the word punchable.
Punchable, as in I'd like to punch him.
Punch it without recourse.
Oh, I don't read those types of books. That's interesting. I do want to comment on something you just said, though.
Please.
I do believe there are really good people in both parties. It's the leadership at the top that's so negative, narcissistic, mean-spirited, and vengeful that is causing problems. Uh, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, good people. The problem with the Republicans, they're scared to death. When I say Republicans, I'm speaking about the Congress and the Senate. They are scared to death to oppose Donald Trump because he will ruin their career and ruin their life. So it's only one person we have a problem with right now, and that's where there's a lack of vision. Uh, he's a very angry man. God knows why. Father didn't love him. Who knows what happened many years ago. Uh, but the people in our Congress and Senate are good people. They're good leaders. They've created great lives and they've done a lot for their constituents. We just have one person who is in a bad mood 24/7. But I
Yeah,
can't think
yes.
of.
Something that happened to him that made me worried was the failed assassination attempt, so to say, because it's one of the things. I think one of the things that I found in that I'm always worried about as a student of psychology is Adolf Hitler, for instance, had a near-death experience when he was at the front of the First World War. And he
Yeah.
was like on a bicycle delivering news, not news, but messages, And it's like, and he came back, and in the trenches, all his friends were dead because like artillery hit it. And he believed from this point of view that he was chosen
Huh.
to live, to redeem Germany and to lead it into a thing. And I think that's something I found with many emperors, or that there's this sense of I am ordained to lead this, and I am the one person chosen by God. And it seems to be a human theme that can be activated in those or amplified in those moments. And that's like something that always worried me, where how can this not change a person? And maybe if something happens like this to a leader, maybe they are not the most reasonable ones to stay moderate and in the center of decision making. Anyway, I'm digressing. Okay, if you could send a video message from this interview, and by any chance all world leaders from today would listen to this little piece of the podcast, it would be sort of like streamed to all their phones right now. What would that be?
I would want them to think, how can we unite? How can we become more focused as humanity to improve the world? And I'm not saying how to get rich. How can we unite and bring more peace to the countries that are battling and to the people who are battling? Because we have a lot of bright people in this world, whether it's America or the world. Like, we have a lot more bright people in the world than we do just here. If I would like to ask them, if you could change, if we could look back, if we could fast forward 3 years from now. So now we're looking back at 2025. How much could we change to make this a great life in the next 3 years? Because then I got them thinking more about what could we do? How can we work together? What problems can we eliminate? Because when I believe when you can inspire great minds, you can inspire great things, great events, great vision, and create hope. That's what I'd do.
This gave me hope also, and it reminded me of these conversations I had with just ordinary civilians on how to stop a particular habit by
Yeah.
getting them to look into the future and saying, what would constitute a vision for you that would allow you to get rid of that? What would be a better thing? That's beautiful. Um, I walk a lot past graveyards. I don't know why. Maybe because I'm a weirdo, but I was there inspire me like to think like what these guys' lives are like. One of the things in Germany that's quite cool, maybe you guys have this too, is there's often a one-liner about the graves. It's an epitaph. What would yours be? I know.
Well, when I walk by a graveyard and I see, let's say, for example, 1925 to 1995, and there's a dash in between those two dates, if I could talk to the people in a graveyard, I would ask, what was the best thing you did with that dash? That from the beginning to the end, what was the best thing you did during the time you were alive? Question mark. What difference did you make? Who did you inspire? Did you live the life of your dreams that impacted other people? That's what I'd want to know. And
If
if we had a celebration of life, what would your colleagues, family, and friends say about you? Because when I die, and this is already in my will, we're not having a typical funeral where people stand around and cry. We're having a celebration of life, which my wife she understands completely. And I want people to talk about how I inspired them, how I encouraged them, the difference I made in their life at some point in their life. And, what are their best thoughts about me? How did I help them? That's going to be a celebration of life.
if we would equip this celebration of your life, for instance, with a hologram on AI avatar that would appear, and you would give a speech as a speaker, what do you feel the first segment would be about, and what would you tell them?
I would tell them to think about the people in their life who inspired them, encouraged them, taught them good life lessons, and now pass that, pay it forward. Help others based on what other people helped you with because it made a difference in their life in a positive way. So all I say is pay it forward and make a difference, in the next 10, 20, 30 years, however you're going to live. The things you learn from others that made you feel better and help you succeed in life and with your goals, pay it forward. It doesn't cost anything. And it's worth so much.
If post-mortem you would meet God and you guys would sit down and watch a highlight reel of Neil's life, what do you think is the moment where you would say, that was my favorite one?
Wow. Well, there won't be one thing, Daniel. I've touched a lot of lives in a positive way. It would, if I think of our children, it would be the encouragement I shared with them after or during a sports event, or hope I gave them after they considered that they failed, maybe dropping a pass for a touchdown or missing a goal that would have won the game in hockey, and how I encouraged them and said, "That's just one game. You got this. Let me help you work on the shot making or catching the ball," which is actually what I've done. And those stories are on YouTube. I think he would look at me and say, that was a big one. You made a big difference there.
It's been an honor and a privilege to talk to you today. I'm very happy we connected. For those who are listening, how can we help you as you're so generous in offering your help to others? And where can we find you?
Well, I finally have a YouTube channel and it's building up subscribers, but I only have 97. My message is on there about hope and goal setting and making a difference and being the best you can be. Otherwise, my website is Neil, Neil, at neilwoodconsulting.com. And if there are groups or audiences that I can speak to inspire and encourage and feel more positive about the future, reach out. I love being on stage doing that. And compared to some speakers, my prices are very reasonable because my mission is not to make a gazillion dollars, it's to make a difference while I'm here.
Thank you so much for showing up today. And for those who listened, there will be many meaningful moments, maybe of this conversation eventually, hopefully. But one of the things I would like you to dwell about is that how the individual skills we are acquiring in one domain, such as skills, for instance, are in potential enough to change the whole world and to unite a whole nation. So don't underestimate the importance of consuming true education that was created with a pass it forward mind without the intent of getting anything from you. Thanks so much for listening, and I'm looking forward to you dropping in the next episode also. Thank you so much.
Daniel, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure and an honor to be on your show.